Hi, I'm Nick Rafferty. I'm calling in from Chicago, representing the trial of the Chicago 7.
Hi, I'm Tim Kenieski, calling in from Cleveland, Ohio. I was a location scout for Judas and the Black Messiah.
Hi, this is Bill Garvey. I was a location manager on Judas and the Black Messiah in Cleveland, Ohio.
Hello, I'm Bill Darby. I was the supervising location manager on Enola, Holmes, and I'm zooming in from London.
My name is Jess Macdonald. I was a location manager on Enola, Holmes, zooming in from London.
3, 2, 1. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dodd Vickers. I'm a location manager based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Also host the Locations on 2 podcast for the Location Managers Guild International. You can find that at locationson2.com. Today, we're talking to people that worked in the category of outstanding locations in a period film, which were nominated by the Location Managers Guild and its membership. Nick, let's talk a little bit about the trial of the Chicago 7. Obviously, this is talking about the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in this 1968. And my understanding is none of this was filmed in Chicago, correct?
No, actually, the film started here with 9 days. And actually, it was primarily the flashback scenes, recreating the riots outside of the convention in Chicago. We were following in the footsteps of the actual demonstrators and of the confrontation. And so much of this is well documented in American history, looking back at archival footage and the photographs. But it mirrored so much of what happened in the last year in resembling the discord that it was just, it was an amazing thing to recreate. And then 6 months, 7 months later, to sort of watch it unfold in real time, again in present day.
And when did you scouted for the film and managed, correct?
That's right. So Trial of Chicago 7 had just a fascinating history. It's a film that almost didn't get made at least 5 or 6 times. And it's a legendary film in Chicago in the sense that it's one of those films that came around, knocked on the door. I remember hearing stories 7, 8 years ago about a scout that was scouting for this back when Steven Spielberg was slated to direct it. It's been an on and off film. And I think finally the producers and Aaron Sorkin and Steven Spielberg decided now was the time to make it. It was now or never. And it was just the election between Trump and Biden was looming, that showdown. And we didn't know at the time exactly what that was going to look like, but the stage was set to make this film. And by sheer will, I think Aaron Sorkin and the producers made it happen.
So I assume, a lot of times when we get invited to participate in a show and there's been a previous scout, you start going through the archives. How much had changed between the original scouting and when you picked up as far as where you were looking for the locations, where they wanted to film, and that kind of thing? What was the transition between the original scouts and your work?
Yeah, I mean, so much time had elapsed that we were starting fresh. I mean, there was a new designer. There was a changing of the guard just in terms of people at the top. I mean, in this incarnation, Aaron took the helm, not just as the writer of the film, but, as the director. And so I think I was first contacted almost 6 months prior when the film was landing in Toronto. So they had set up shop in Toronto. They had gotten stages ready. They were in heavy pre-production, and filming on location in Chicago and taking a part of the film there was always key. It was always part of the narrative, but the cost became somewhat prohibitive. And when kind of at the 11th hour, the numbers came in, they shut down. They shut down production in Toronto, and it looked like the film was about to fall apart. And the year sort of marched on. It was radio silence for months and months and months. And then I got a call from Stuart Besser, who's just an indefatigable producer. He's someone who I know Aaron works with and trusts inherently. And he's someone I'd worked with before. And he said, Nick, I think we found a way to make this film. And the way was to go to New Jersey. They had found some more funding. In many ways, this was an independent film. It was a film that at the last minute was boarded by Cross Creek and Paramount. And then during the pandemic, Netflix swooped in and ended up distributing it. But Stuart called and said, hey, listen, we're not in Toronto anymore, we're in New Jersey, but we still basing this and getting the actual scenes in Chicago is just so important. It's so important to Aaron that we're coming, and we wanna pick up where we left off. So where we left off was right in the center of Chicago in Grant Park. It is really Chicago's front lawn. For anyone who's been to Chicago, Michigan Avenue is this iconic street full of Chicago's amazing architecture, period, turn of the century architecture. It has amazing hotels, restaurants, and some of the first skyscrapers in the United States. And Grant Park is this amazing green canvas that stretches out in front of it. And then Lake Michigan's behind that. And really that was the site of these demonstrations. It was the site of these protests in 1968. And it's really been Chicago's civic space, front and center. When President Obama was elected, there was a massive rally there. It's where Lollapalooza is held. It's where the Chicago Marathon begins. It's really kind of Chicago's centerpiece. And that's what we needed to do to recreate this. So we had to get the park in between the Chicago Marathon, and also on the same weekend that a Chicago Bears game was playing, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Grant Park. So really the trick in this case was coordinating and convincing the city that we wanted to stage a massive protest scene when all of these other civic events were sandwiching us.
Yeah, the only experience I've had comparable to this, we did a biopic about Gloria Steinem that we filmed entirely in Savannah, with the exception of some scenes that were done in India. And recreating places like Boston and New York and the Badlands and doing it all in Savannah, you know, totally, the environment doesn't compare. New Jersey's a little closer to Chicago, but what were some of the biggest challenges you had with convincers, like finding places in New Jersey that close enough? And, you know, was the director shooting it so in a certain way that helped you like narrow the focus a little bit to convince people you were still in Chicago?
Yeah, so I have to share this honor with my colleague, Dennis Voskov. He was in New Jersey. He led the New York, New Jersey location team, and hats off to him, because half of this film takes place in a courtroom, and it was weeks and weeks in a period courtroom. And of course, those are very hard to find. And it's my understanding that they found in Paterson in New Jersey, a church which had amazing sort of period detail, just, you know, something that with the windows they could light up. And Shane Valentino was the designer. They found this amazing church and built a courtroom within it, and then took the rest of the scenes that we didn't film in Chicago, which was actually the majority of the film, and set that in and around New Jersey. I think it was Paterson and Newark. And they did a fantastic job sort of getting the meat of this story in New Jersey, where ultimately this film ended up being based. So it was 9 days in Chicago, and I think about 20, I'm gonna say 25, and that's spitballing, in New Jersey.
What, as far as Chicago went, the pieces you filmed in Chicago, did the city jump in to kind of help represent this historical piece of, documentation that you guys were doing in a dramatic way, or how much was the city involved? Because you find some cities really get excited to participate in recreating something like this.
It was a really interesting time in Chicago's history. We had a changing of the guard in the mayor's office. We had a new mayor in Lori Lightfoot. We also had a new film commissioner. A location manager himself ascended to the role of Chicago Film Commissioner Kwame Amoku, which is great, but we had a new administration. And I think when we first came with this proposal to recreate a moment in Chicago's history that is somewhat fraught, that's definitely challenging, there was a little bit of, how do we approach this? And I remember a meeting that we went into with really the city's top brass. It was mostly police and emergency communications. And Chicago is a very film-friendly town. I mean, we've done Transformers. We've got the Dick Wolf series here. There's at least 10 shows on the ground filming all over the city, but it's a whole different deal to take a significant swath of downtown and with a very tight schedule and recreate a protest. So it was certainly a challenge, not least of all because we were racing against fall. The leaves were about to change at any moment. One of the first things Stuart Besser had me do was call an arborist and try to look into the crystal ball and figure out when the leaves would turn from green to this bright yellow that they're known for. We were looking at images of the Chicago Marathon in years past, which also takes place in October, to see what color the leaves were on the trees then, to try to figure out exactly what our timeline was in terms of the absolute last moment that we could film this in the fall and make it look like the summer. So we had the Chicago Marathon to deal with, which was the weekend before. And this is, like a 1 million person race. I mean, over 1 million people typically turn out for this massive event. They come from all over the world. It's just like the New York City Marathon or the Boston Marathon. And they literally take over all of Grant Park with medical tents and just infrastructure that they work around the clock to build for this massive event. And we wanted to come in on the heels of that like a week later. And then, of course, the weekend that we chose, there was a Bears game. And, the Bears are sacred in Chicago. You really can't get in the way of those Bears. And so we asked to close Michigan Avenue, which has been done, but very, very rarely in Chicago for filming. And we asked to march 300 extras down the street, dressed as hippies, and create all kinds of mayhem and make signs that said, the police are pigs. And, we had some great moments on set where the actors were so in character, and a lot of the police officers that we cast, or that extras casting background found, were actually Chicago police officers. There was a lot of sort of antagonizing going on between the sides as there was almost this face-off and this line in the park with this incredible statue, the General Logan statue in the background. And this is all exactly where it happened in 1968. So it was just kind of incredible to bring that back to life, to almost recreate. It's almost like the Civil War battle in Gettysburg, but doing it right there in Chicago's front lawn.
Well, congratulations on your nomination for this category. But what was your one favorite moment? If you think back of the entire project, did you have a specific moment or time, whether it's scouting or during production, that stands out to you?
I think for me as a location manager, one of the things I take such great pleasure in is nurturing the creative process. We are among the first on the ground in production to wrap our heads around a script. And we are often sort of the first witnesses, or at least standing there when the director begins to translate the page to the place. And bringing Aaron Sorkin and the team, which included Shane Valentino, marvelously talented designer, Phaedon Papamichael, who is an incredible, incredible cinematographer, and Joe Reedy, who is a legendary first AD, and Stuart Besser. I mean, just these are people who I admire and people who I look up to, and being their guide through history and watching them all try to figure this out, the problems that we must overcome, the challenges, the hurdles that just seem impossible, sort of watching them all brilliantly, but from their own perspective, navigate this. While we're tromping, up and down Michigan Avenue, dodging cars, trying to get a pizza, just how are we going to do this? And trying to offer those solutions. It's fascinating. The whole thing is just something I'm extremely honored to have been a part of. Not only because it's an important piece of Chicago history, but it's also a piece of American history that deserves a place on the shelf among great films. And certainly when it came out, it was well received, and we could not have known when we were making it how relevant it would be to the time and to what unfolded only months later. So, history has a way of repeating itself, and certainly the stories that we tell and the art that we make is really important in that process of just remembering and figuring out the way forward.
Well, Nick, I know you're working on set today, so we had to slip you in first, and I'm glad you could make a few minutes. Originally, I don't think you were going to be able to join us, but I'm glad you were. So thanks for jumping in. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you so much. And I just also want to recognize the New Jersey team and Dennis Voskov, who was so instrumental in bringing this film together. And hats off to him and his team as well.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. And it's funny that we're going to be able to bookend it. It may have worked out well because here we are talking about Judas and the Black Messiah, also taking place originally in Chicago. And I've got Bill Garvey and Tim Kenieski joining us to talk about that.
And
Bill
might I
and
add,
Tim?
one of our main characters is shared in both stories. So Fred Hampton appeared in both movies.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So, Tim, what you and Bill both managed? Let's see, Tim scouted, Bill, you managed, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, look at me getting it right. So, Tim, did you start before Bill, or were you brought in at the same time?
No, I was on another movie. I think it was The Marksman with Liam Neeson. And the day I ended, I started the next day. I just jumped right onto Judas. So there was already another even scout. I think Brian Eiler was scouting before I got onto it. But yeah, so Bill was clearly on before I was. I'm lucky enough that Bill brings me on to a lot of movies that he works on.
It's not luck. It's not luck.
Yeah, you earned that, I'm sure. That's not something that comes easy. So, Bill, you got the call that here they want to create this movie. That obviously the story takes place, also based on real events, takes place in Chicago in the 60s. Was there talk of doing it in Chicago? Did you start scouting there, or did they always know they wanted to be in Ohio?
They might have. Honestly, by the time I was offered the job, they were clearly set to shoot in Ohio. So Ted Gidlow, the UPM, gave me a call, and I was on Hillbilly Elegy down in the Cincinnati area. And so I jumped. I think I might have jumped on late. I think Brian started before I even got on. And Tim, you might have started before I switched over too. I can't remember, but yeah. So then we hit the ground running. Sam Lysenko was the production designer, And he had spent a ton of time researching and digging up archival footage and photography. And it was a really big help in trying to recreate Chicago in the 1960s. And, you know, we scouted for a good 3 months and really had to dig deep to find the Black Panther headquarters. And that was the hardest thing to find, and that's where Tim came in. And we were looking for basically an old building, you know, pre-war, that had the space and kind of characteristics that matched a lot of this reference footage that we saw. And maybe Tim, can you talk to us about how you went about finding the ultimate location that ended up being our main Black Panther headquarters?
And what was the, you know, the direction you were given when you started to look for this, that you knew it was going to be challenging to find too, Tim? That's, you know, the process we go through before we get out and start hitting the pavement is always interesting as far as what the production designer or director tells you before you go out and start looking.
Right. Well, you know, I mean, I kind of had an idea what they wanted. I think the biggest difficulty, especially with Cleveland, is, you know, so much that could have been used has been gentrified, right? So there'll be brand new buildings right next to something that could have looked like the 60s. And then in the other direction, there were the neighborhoods that are just so far gone, you know, that you can't really do much with. And the area that I focused on, which was like Slavic Village, which is southeast of Cleveland, it's right, it's on the brink. It's actually could go either one of two ways. It's either starting to be gentrified or it's going to go the other direction. And this movie actually couldn't have been shot where it was shot maybe 5 years from now, because either the buildings are going to become too dilapidated or they're going to be overly rehabbed and too nice. But yeah, the building that ended up being the Black Panther headquarters, you know, I was trying to get into it for a while. Hunting down these building owners was the biggest nightmare, because people own buildings, but they don't live on site. And then I have to track them down. You know, I feel like I'm a private detective. But as soon as I was able to go inside and it's like the clouds open, I'm like, this is it. I was like, there's no way they're not going to love this. I just felt like it was perfect the minute I walked inside it.
And that was the case across the board. So when I opened that email that night and that picture popped up on my screen, it was the clouds parting, the sun shining down, the angels singing. Like, oh, thank God, this is it. And it was across the board. I mean, it was an obvious choice. So it was the last functioning SRO hotel in all of Cleveland, and for that matter, probably even further in the region. So there was actually a pre-war building built in the 1860s, still had all the original architecture, the original wallpaper. It was just crazy how perfect it was. The patina, the layers of paint, you know, just everything was perfect. There wasn't really much they had to do. And when you talk about the difficulties shooting a period piece, the problems we faced was this building is so old and this area is so, you know, dilapidated. Just keeping it intact for the run of the movie, you know, we held on to it for a couple of months, was the biggest issue and the biggest hurdle. So there were times when we would be filming inside and the walls were weeping rain as it rained outside. I mean, it was, and we patched the roof and, you know, did our best, but you really couldn't fix it to the point where it was watertight. And, you know, just the age of the building meant the heat really didn't function, and, you know, just keeping everybody warm in December weather in Cleveland, it was difficult. But
what time of year were you filming?
It was, I think we started in October and we finished at the end of December.
And I did a little digging.
You get in the brunt of the weather here in Cleveland by the end of it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying I did a little bit of digging, and it looked like this is in a historic district. And is it managed by the National Park Service or just kind of overseen by them? The Broadway Avenue Historic District. Is this building that one?
Well, it's a public street. It's not managed
Right.
by, I mean, it was a privately owned building, amongst
Right.
other buildings that, and this one is functioning, but a lot of the buildings on the same street are abandoned. So that, you know, there was a lot of, from a period standpoint, it was great. You know,
Mhm.
you still have to, we had to take away some light poles and a little bit of modern, you know, bus shelters and that kind of thing, just to, you know, recreate the period nature of the exterior. And then we built out, you know, Sam Lisinko and his team built out the facade to match the reference pictures. But otherwise, the interior was pretty intact the way we found it. We had to abate it. You know, obviously there was lead paint and, you know, asbestos and all that kind of stuff to get rid of and clean up. But you know, otherwise they really didn't have to do much to the inside.
I just didn't know if, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with places that are registered as historic sites, you have to deal with a little bit of extra paperwork to get a permission to do modifications and changes and things, even though you may be saving it in some way or turning it into a better location than it was when you got it.
Yeah,
Um,
building I mean, you have to get a building permit for the facade. So we did that, and just a permit for the street, but it wasn't, you know, landmark building, to be honest.
And Tim,
Um,
was it occupied when you found it? Are there people living in the building now, or is it mostly empty? Or
Yeah. So he was renting it out to a couple of people actually, and that was to my surprise because some of the rooms were not. You couldn't stay in them. He locked them, you know, because he didn't want anybody in them. Um, but yeah, he had a couple of people living in there somehow. I don't know.
yeah.
and so what was the process you went through with the current residents and the owner when you finally made the connection and you realized they were interested in filming? What was that conversation like?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously you cut a deal, and we paid the two tenants to move out for the months that we were owning the property, and it was a pretty straightforward process. We did, you know, really do some cleanup work that he was interested in as well, and there was a lot of old, you know, just accumulated stuff in all the rooms that we cleaned out for him. So it was pretty straightforward. You know, the city has always been pretty easy to work with and supportive of the film business in Ohio. And so the permitting process was straightforward. We rerouted some bus lines, you know, traffic control. We did the whole shootout scene is right out in front of this building, you know, so we were there for, it was all together about 3 weeks of filming there. Yeah. So,
And
you know, yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Please continue.
So all together, it was, you know, a pretty great location to film. Pretty ideal, you know, both exterior and interior. We didn't have to really do any modifications period wise to the other buildings in the street. Although, you know, they did signage and just little touch ups here and there. But for the most part, it was the street as you see it.
And I heard there was a specific color that kept popping up in your locations that was already in place, and it kind of became a theme throughout
It did.
because yeah.
Yeah, this like that 1960s green, it was everywhere. It's, you know, and that wasn't just that location. It was a bunch of our churches and a lot of the other, you know, we had several organizations. So the Young Patriots, you know, the place we ended up shooting, their headquarters also had that kind of patina green color to it. It just seemed popping up. It was kind of interesting that, you know, that kind of color from the 60s, it was still there, and we took advantage of it.
Did you guys have any idea how well it was going to be received? Because I know you sure heard a lot about it. Netflix obviously was 100% behind this project, and it turned out amazingly well. But did you have any idea what you were getting into and how well it would be received when you were working on it? Or sometimes you hear that there's like a moment where you get a feeling like this is going to be something special?
Well, it had a good, you know, leadership. I mean, Shaka King, you know, he's a pretty impressive guy, and he really knew what he wanted, and he was a great leader, and he made it easy because he knew what he wanted and was pretty direct about the look that he was going for, and Sam, you know, along with him and Sean Bobbitt, the DP, you know, it was a good team. So it really, I wasn't surprised when it ended up being as good a movie as it was.
How
Yeah,
about for you, Tim?
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, obviously just before it was released, I had a feeling that it was going to have a huge impact just because of the political climate, everything that was happening, in not just the United States, but across the world.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I had a pretty good idea, or a feeling, I should say. Yeah.
When you look at the locations you had in the film and the process you go through to either find them or get them approved, and is there, this obviously was the one you thought was going to be the hardest to find and you were excited and sounds like it was the most rewarding. Is there another one that jumps out at you when you guys were digging into what you had to find for this? Because you did film all over in several different parts of Ohio and it looks beautiful.
Yeah. So we ended up at Mansfield Reformatory, and that's iconic for having been the Shawshank Redemption prison. So I as a big fan of that movie, I was really, really excited about filming there as well. Just been following their footsteps, and that, that location is stunning. It's just an amazing piece of architecture and history, and so it was great to get the chance to film there finally. I've been here for a long time, and I've shown a lot of movies that location, and this was the first time a movie chose it. So I was really happy about that.
How about you, Tim?
Yeah, well, I was thinking, so for this movie, honestly, this was maybe one of two movies that was probably the most enjoyable for me to scout overall, just because of everything I was scouting, either really cool old historic churches or old buildings that were about to be, collapsed or about to be demolished. It was actually really cool. I mean, for everything that made the movie, there was a lot, obviously, that doesn't get shown, but I get to go into all these places, get roof access. It was actually one of the more enjoyable experiences that I had scouting, for sure. But overall, I don't know if I have like a favorite location other than maybe the Black Panther headquarters was pretty sweet, but it was good.
We were able to come in behind, like we did a shootout sequence on St. Clair Avenue, just outside of downtown Cleveland. And right after we filmed, a few months later, a bunch of the buildings were demolished. So it's good to kind of capture that on film, that all those historical buildings that aren't here anymore.
Well, I know it was a lot of work and it shows. I mean, it paid off, and it was a great film, and you guys did a great job. I wish you the best of luck, and congratulations on your nominations in this category as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's talk about Mank for a minute, Bill.
Okay.
So, fantastic film. If for those of you that have not seen it or have seen it, really incredible. And so did you know let's just say starting out, did you know you were onto something really special with Mank, and what was the origin of that?
The origin is it's a long-standing relationship with David Fincher and I. I've been with him off and on since the early 2000s, and Benjamin Button, and actually one or two shows before that actually didn't happen. But it's a script he's had since the early 90s that his father wrote. And the last big time he had it going was with Paramount in the late 90s. And when we were doing reshoots on Mindhunter 2, the season 2, and we were doing those reshoots in LA, he just walked in with a banker's box into my office and goes, "Here's what we're doing next." And it was essentially all the research and storyboards and everything else for when he had the movie in the 90s. We just had to figure out what to replace everything that had been torn down since the 90s, including things like Perinos and whatnot. But that's how it started. It was just kind of it's a little group of folks that constantly are working together now. I worked straight with David since 2014 now. So it's just project to project with this guy. It's amazing.
Right. And knowing now I worked with him once for a commercial / music video, and that was he is a very exacting demanding director. And knowing that, in terms of locations, you were dealing, number one, with a period piece, and number two, with a period piece that was shot in black and white. So how exacting were you guys about trying to shoot and were you able to shoot at any of the original locations? And
yeah, I mean, the first thing I had to break down is that we were never going to get to shoot in the real Hearst Castle. One, because we needed the run of the place, and you just can't get that. Two, we didn't have the money to go up there with the crew. That's expensive as well, just housing and everything else. So we knew we had to break it up into several pieces in order to get an idea of just how massive and various the locations are there. And then, but the other place that was fun to shoot in was the actual place that Mankiewicz wrote the script. I mean, he went to what was then called the North Verde Ranch, which still exists and almost identical to the way it was. And there's always something in a movie like this, just like in Benjamin Button, there was always something special. And that was, to me, the real special thing is the same family owns it that owned it. Great grandma was the one there serving breakfast to Mankiewicz and everybody else and trying to hide the liquor, which is exactly what happened. And there was a great connection there too. And that was fun. And then we're talking about the black and white. David has particular colors that he hates, and red is one of them. Well, the best thing about black and white is red looks amazing. So what we did was we had the scouts only use their iPhones. One that locks you into a particular lens. So there's no cheating at 16 millimeters. So he really knows what size the place and room is, and if he can get a camera in the corner. And two, we would just use the filter, which is noir. And that's what we would send to David. So you knew what it felt like in the kind of black and white LUT that we were going to shoot in, just from the scouting photos, which was a lot of fun too.
That's super, super interesting, just technique wise. And now where else? So the ranch was one of them. What about the studio backbot? Which backbot did you end up?
Well, we ended up using the interesting thing about Paramount is that back in the day, there's a north-south line at Paramount close to the Gower side, which is actually where the dividing line between RKO and Paramount used to be, because RKO and Paramount were right next to each other. Now it's all Paramount. So we were able to use stuff that was there for that whole opening scene when Lederer shows up right off the train from New York, basically. That was backlot of Paramount, and it was easy to make it look like 1929, which is what it was supposed to be. And then we went back to the old MGM, Sony. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to hide there, a lot of modern things, but that's where we did a bulk of the Louis B. Mayer stuff. And then finally, for the big scene with what's her name's bungalow getting carted away from MGM and heading over to Warner Brothers, we actually used Warner Brothers because it still has that great alley of giant sound stages from the 30s. So we did basically use 3 of the majors to create just 2.
Right. And what about for example, the Biltmore when the scene of the Oscars, where did you guys go for that?
That's a fun one. We didn't do it at the Biltmore Bowl, which had been built strictly for the Oscars back by then, by the 40s or late 30s, I think. The Biltmore Bowl. The Biltmore Bowl back in the day was a 2-story place with a mezzanine. Now it's been cut in half and it doesn't work. But we shot it in the Crystal, which is where they used to have the Oscars in the black and white days, or back when the first and second Oscars, it was at the Biltmore like that. So we use that room. So there's a little bit of a tie-in for where it actually was as well.
Yeah, the other location what did you end up using for Hearst Castle?
We let's see, we used the villa that most people think is the Getty Villa, but it's really not. So when it sits high above the PCH. That's
a fun place to shoot.
Yeah, it's an interesting setup there. We used Huntington Gardens. We broke it up in a couple of places, and then the production designer and his team blew it out of the park with their builds because they built that dining room scene. And then we reused the same set over at LA Center, which you can't tell, and went back, 5-6 weeks later and shot the scenes where it's the birthday party. So it's flawless, and they didn't do exact duplicates, but they took a lot of the ideas of what Hearst had done. We had tried to do it at a location, but we just needed to do too much lighting and too much smoke and real cigar smoke. It just wasn't going to work at a house, and the cost was, almost 2/3 of what it was going to cost to build anyways. So it was almost a wash to do that on stage.
Right. Got it. I want to, is there, maybe tell us some of the other like really unique things about scouting for that, and
Well, what you realize is Los Angeles's reputation for tearing down the past is still true. Even just in the time from 98 to now, when you like half the places that were set up, Rick Schuler had been doing it back in the 90s for David, were gone, including places like Perino's, which we were going to use for the Tropicana, and we ended up doing the old Rex, which is Cicada now in the Oviatt building. But how much disappears so quickly here, and how much I think you have to be a little more proactive in saving some of those things as much as we can. That was one of the challenges and one of the surprises that the stereotype is true in Los Angeles, where other places, especially in Europe, but even in New York and Pittsburgh, where they love that stuff and don't want to get rid of it. So that was one of the heartbreaks, to be honest with you. Other than that, you really had to get creative on how to cheat things, especially the driving footage. And one of the more remarkable things, which unfortunately we didn't shoot as a location, but we found the source of it, which was an old rear screen projection footage that they had shot for MGM back in 1937, was the scene where Mank and his wife are driving to the beach. And he's reading the paper and he's seen the billboards and he's seeing that stuff. To be honest with you, what they did is they took that old footage and built the entire, that was Beverly Hills, Wilshire Boulevard, and built it all in CG. And we shot it on video wall. I mean, which is what everybody's using at these, especially during the pandemic, to double for locations. You still need source, but boy, there's a lot of stuff that's almost all video wall these days.
I was wondering about that. There's a lot of that, like the shot when they're at the beach in the little cabana on the beach. And I, forgive me, you guys, but being from Los Angeles, there just was a lot that was, recognizable, that, that you, when it's shot in your city, that you sort of turn your head sideways. And then, wait, how did they do that? Oh, I see, they did that. There was a lot of that for me I really want to go back and watch it. If you guys haven't seen it, it's really an incredible film.
Hey, JJ, just going to jump in for 1 second. I've got the folks from Enola Holmes to talk about their nominated piece. Jess Macdonald and Bill Darby are with me today. Hey guys, welcome and congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very exciting.
Well, we wanted to talk to you about Enola Holmes and where it was shot and where it has been scouted. Is it true everything was filmed in England?
Yes, everything was filmed in England, yeah.
And when did you guys begin scouting for this project, and how long was that process?
Well, we started filming at the end of June. I think I started scouting. It's relatively short, the production period, pre-production. I started scouting in January 2019.
Very good. And then when did you start shooting the film?
I think it was the end of June.
Very
so
good.
It was about 5 or 6 months scouting.
And when you started the scouting, what type of information were you given to gather? Were there certain places or a look, or what type of things did you have to bring to the
subject
table?
matter predictates what you're looking for, I think, pretty much. Victorian London, beautiful English countryside, certain elements which we had to have, which we knew, like the railway, a house that could be adapted into a fairly moth-eaten looking place, in the sense that it needed to feel like it had been lived in by a family for many years and had seen better days. But the challenge was really London. I think, apart from the house itself, was quite, which was an exhaustive process of looking at lots of different options. But we had a very fully fleshed out script from the start, which is a rarity these days. And so things were fairly smooth going, really. We're just looking up a lot of options and looking into a lot of options and offering them up to Harry Bradbeer and the designer Michael Carlin.
Now, when we talk about the house in Ferndale, how did you come to land on that one?
Well, we from the start, I was fairly adamant that we didn't look too close to London because most of it's been shot to death, and they wanted something new and unique. And Benthall Hall had never been filmed or featured in a major production before, it kind of focused, the area of most interest focused on what we call the borders, the Shropshire, Herefordshire, and because we knew we were going to go and shoot on the Severn Valley Railway quite early on. We decided on the Severn Valley Railway, and then you sort of focus in on various areas of the country where you know you've got to go anyway. And so if we're going to overnight away from town, then we made a big effort to try and find the location within striking distance of the Severn Valley Railway, which is a big area, offers up a lot of worthwhile locations that aren't usually seen on film.
Now, Jess, when we talk about like the locations of these films and where they landed, how far were they apart from one another? You see all these blogs online about the filming locations of Enola Holmes and how people are taking these set jetting vacations instead of jet setting, that they're going and seeing based on these shows that they found such a connection with. Like, how did that lay out for you guys? I know it was over several months of shooting.
Well, it span around a bit.
Shooting. Yeah, so they always sort of congregate everything together. So filming up in the Severn Valley Railway was for 2 weeks, I think we ended up doing up there, and then everything sort of came back into sort of London and Surrey. We were in for a bit as well, but it all worked very well together.
When we start talking about the House of Lord exterior, was this like, how many locations do you bring to the table when you talk, to be able to land on this one?
Well, obviously you can't shoot the real House of Lords you might have done if the subject matter had been, like for instance, Suffragette. They managed to shoot in the House of Commons itself, but not on a production like this with its relatively different sort of profile. So we looked at buildings that mirrored the sort of weight and authority that the House of Lords has, and emulated something as close as possible to the real thing.
That's fascinating. The beautiful grounds of the old Greenwich Royal Naval College. Can you talk about doing your work there?
You go ahead, Jess.
Yes, the delights of Greenwich. I mean, it's an enormous place to film in, and there's a lot of control to be had there. But it's beautiful, the grounds, and it was over several weeks that we built. Well, I say several weeks, actually. We ended up being quite restricted to our build there. So there was some overnight building we had to do to get everything in play. But it was certainly very entertaining watching the entire farm basically run down the centre of Greenwich.
It's not as easy as it used to be, Greenwich. It used to be all under the authority of one umbrella organisation, the charity that looks after the buildings. But now there's two different for educational establishments, all based in the same old campus. So you now have a number of moving parts to deal with, and everybody's various interests to take care of, and it's not as simple as it used to be. When I first started, it was pretty much empty. But now there's 2 universities there.
Oh my goodness, yes. And boy,
Yeah,
they
the
always
music
take up the
colleges,
space, don't they? Just kind of rounding your locations here is obviously everyone is so obsessed with train stations, I think, because it is such a relic. Let's talk about is it Basilweather?
Basilweather, what, the house or the station?
The station.
Ah, yes. Well, there are quite a number of heritage railways to choose from in the UK. But what we were after in principle was something very bucolic, very much quintessentially English countryside. There's lovely scenes of it from the air, the railway itself, I mean, we did do a bit of redecoration there, quite a bit really, to change the look of it a bit, as it was not quite the color we were hoping for when we got there to scout it. So, you know, there's a lot of preparation involved, and railways are also tricky things, timings and choreography for all and you do worry about whether it's all going to come together, because you're mostly with heritage railways working with a lot of volunteers, and so they have to keep up their time in order to make your schedule work. And you know, they're not the most reliable things, old steam engines. They sometimes go wrong.
Did you guys have any problems with the engines while you guys were there?
No, we didn't. But you know, when you're getting a steam engine going in the morning, they have to get in at about 2 a.m. So even earlier than us.
Yeah.
Oh, well, any final thoughts? I would just love to hear, like, maybe what your favorite or aha moments, or your favorite moment, you know, and if you were on our panel listening to the others, a lot of it's the day before the last day is some of their favorite moments. I'm just wondering what you guys, I know it's been a while since you've had to even think about it, but maybe what you took away and your experience with it.
I could think of my least favorite moment, which was when our location for the big house, where the sort of aristocratic family lived, which is Basilweather in the film. We were going to shoot at a house called Audley End in Essex, which was another overnight location, and we'd gone down months of negotiations about how to stage the fight and the gunfire and what have you inside of what is effectively a Grade 1 national monument. And they had a change of management at the top. It's a sort of it's a charity called English Heritage that was a government institution, looks after, not National Trust, it's another one, which looks after national monuments in the UK, ruins, and Stonehenge is an English heritage property. And anyway, this change of management suddenly decided that in the middle of the summer season, we couldn't shoot there. And I think they really did. This was about, 3 weeks before we were due to start work. And so we had to run around. And that was my least favorite moment on the production. But we did manage to get Hatfield House to stand in for it. And in fact, it worked a lot better, because we didn't have to go away for that. It's not an overnight location. It's within the curtilage of London. So there's the least favorite moment. But otherwise, the production was, generally speaking, a very happy experience for everybody. We had a lot of fun. She's absolutely charming, Millie Bobby Brown, and she had a very good relationship with Harry Bradbeer, who directed it, and so it all gelled up really, very nicely.
Yeah.
Jess?
I mean, it was probably the most satisfying moment was completing Fournier Street, which was just the other London street scene. It was filmed in East London. Then they hate filming, like they loathe it with a passion. And we managed to persuade the council and sweet talk the residents and keep them very happy. We had a very good ALM called Jeanne, who sort of helped with that location and took control of it. And it worked really well in the end, actually, and it looked fantastic on camera, which made a massive difference. That was very satisfying.
Why do you think that location doesn't like filming?
It's overused.
It's been over-filmed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had so much
It's
fun.
one of the
It's
few bits
perfect
of
spot
Georgian
filming.
London that's left, that where you can readily adapt it into a street scene of the period. So it does tend to get a lot of, well, it's not just big film units, it's also commercials and still shoots and all sorts of things want to shoot there. So there is a sort of limit on how often the council will let you in. The local film office has to rest it every now and again, because otherwise people get fed up. So, and that happens quite a bit in London these days. There are certain areas that are fought over by us all, particularly when there's so much production in play, in order to get a foot in the door. So, you know, it's just been overused, I'm afraid.
Well, it just comes up to your charming negotiations.
Yes, they did say they had a great experience with us. And I think
that's good. Well, thank you so much for your time, you guys. I definitely appreciate it, and I'm glad we were able to connect with you.
All right,
Thank you
very good.
much.
Thank you so much,
Lovely to
Erika.
meet you.
Well, thank you all again for joining us for this conversation with the location managers and scouts and professionals involved in the Outstanding Locations category for period film. If you want to find out more about the actual presentation, I hope you'll tune in at 2 p.m. on October 23rd for the award show. And for information on tickets and what's going on with the presentation and other categories, just visit us online at locationmanagers.org. My name's Dodd Vickers, and you can find me online at doddvickers.com and the podcast locationsonto.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next year.